men plumbed the ship, then he sneaks a barrel of fuel out of it, then he pours out a box of mysterious metal to separate the hydrogen from the fuel, and then he sprinkled it with wood chips and ignited it with a wire. When the hydrogen starts to burn, he could get clean fresh water, but the experiment exploded. Nick was knocked unconscious, but he didn't give up. The experiment was rushed. He didn't account for the exhaled oxygen in his calculations, so he took precautions. He started the experiment again. This time he carefully put the fire source into the oxygen mask, and suddenly a spark erupted from inside. Nick was shocked, but luckily, the experiment worked. The plastic sheet was covered with water droplets. Nick marked the date on the wall. He waited for the potatoes to sprout. In his spare time, Nick restored the Mars base. He removed some of the battery panels to increase the range of the rover, and then he kept driving the rover to conduct experiments, keeping track of how far he could travel each time. On the 54th day, Nick finally waited for a miracle. The potatoes he had planted had finally sprouted. On Earth, a memorial service was being held for Nick, but the command center suddenly noticed a change in the Mars base. The rover started moving around. Apparently, Nick was still alive. Everyone was worried. They were afraid he was going to have a psychotic break, so they decided to bring Nick back as soon as possible to make sure he survived. First, they needed to bring in supplies, but it takes at least 6 months to build a transport ship. While everyone was worried about what to do, Nick on Mars was taking a nice long bath and listening to music with great interest. And then some time later, Nick's potatoes were finally ripe. He took the big ones for food and planted the small ones back into the soil. With enough to eat, he became more daring. He began to drive around a lot in his rover, and his range grew wider. This time he drove for 15 days. He finally found an abandoned detector at the target site. He adjusted the equipment and found that the photo function still worked, so he contacted the Earth with a photo.